Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of the newspaper analysis from the UPSC perspective. Today, we have taken up important articles from the Hindu newspaper dated 25th April 2023. Topics which we are going to discuss today are displayed on your screen. Let's begin the discussion.
Now let's start our discussion with the first article which appeared on page number 7 in the Hindu newspaper. Context of this article is that on the occasion of National Panchayati Raj Day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had alleged that the previous Congress governments meted out a stepmotherly treatment to villages. Now you should remember that April 24 is celebrated as Panchayati Raj Divas. So in this context, let us understand what is Panchayati Raj institution, its evolution, then we'll see significance of 73rd Amendment and what are its provisions. Then we'll also discuss issues associated with PRIs and we'll end our discussion with a way forward. Why we have taken this theme? Because devolution of powers and finances up to local levels and challenges therein is important theme under GS paper 2. Also, UPSC has been asking question based on the same. For example, this question based on the importance of Panchayat system came in year 2018. Another question based on the same theme came in year 2015. Now this theme is also important from prelims perspective as in year 2015, UPSC has asked fundamental object of Panchayati Raj system. So with this we can make it that Panchayati Raj institution and important aspects related to it is important theme under GS paper 2. So let's start our discussion. Now the first question is, what is Panchayati Raj institution? Now it is a system of rural local self-government in India. Now what is local self-government? It is the administration of local affairs by such local bodies who have been elected by the local people. So in a federation, the powers and functions of the government are divided among two governments. In India, it is union government and the various state governments. However, with the passage of 73rd and 74th Amendment Act of the Constitution of India in year 1993, the division of powers and functions have been further trickled down to the local self-government. For example, Panchayat at village levels, municipalities and municipal corporations in towns and cities. As such, India now has not two but three tiers of government in its federal setup: union, state and local. The Ministry of Panchayat Raj looks into all matters relating to Panchayati Raj and Panchayati Raj institution, and this ministry was created in year 2004. And here one thing you should remember, that ministry is headed by a minister of cabinet rank. So here as our main topic of discussion, national will be 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992. However, you must understand the evolution or the various efforts to reach that milestone. So in this regard, let's look into the evolution of the Panchayati Raj institutions in India. Now, evolution started with Balwant Rai Mehta Committee, and this committee was appointed in year 1957 to examine and suggest measures for better working of community development program and the National Extension Service. The committee recommended a scheme for democratic decentralization. Now, what is democratic decentralization? It is an extension of the democratic principle that aims at widening the area of the people's participation, authority, and autonomy through devolution of powers to the people's representative organization from the top level to the lowest level in all the three dimensions of political decision making, financial control, and administrative management with least interference and control from higher levels. Another recommendation, three-tier system with directly elected members at village level and the district collector to be made as the chairman of the Jilla Parishad. Now another committee after Balwant Rai committee was Ashok Mehta committee, and this was appointed in year 1977 to suggest measures to revive and strengthen the declining Panchayati Raj system in India. Its main recommendation, three-tier system to be replaced with a two-tier system. See, Balwant Rai committee suggested three-tier system and Ashok Mehta committee recommended two-tier system with Jila Parishad at district level and Mandal Panchayat below it. It also recommended for Nyay Panchayat. Now the next committee after Ashok Mehta committee, GVK Rao committee. This was appointed by the Planning Commission in year 1985 and the main recommendations, first is to reduce the developmental role of the district collector and giving a major role to PRIs. Also, a post of District Development Commissioner should be created. Now the next and the most important committee, LM Singhvi Committee, was appointed by the Government of India in year 1986 with the main objective to recommend steps to revitalize the Panchayat Raj system for democracy and development. Now this committee suggested that the constitutional status must be given to PRIs. And thus, 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act was passed by Parliament in 1992 and got assent on 20th April 1993. So these are the four committees involved with the evolution of the Panchayat Raj institutions in India. And the most important among four is LM Singhvi Committee because this committee recommended constitutional status to PRIs and after that 73rd and 74th Constitutional Act was passed. So now, let's come to the most crucial part of the discussion, that is the significance of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992. Now, 73rd Constitutional Act was a very significant step in creating and transforming the democratic institution at the grassroots level in the country. Basically, this act has transformed the representative democracy into participatory democracy. Now, what does it mean? Now, democracy in general means rules of the people, by the people and for the people. This can be achieved through directly and indirectly. In direct democracy, people themselves participate in decision making. For example, Gram Sabha at the local level. People decide what they want, which will be discussed in Gram Sabha, then the proper decision is taken. In indirect democracy, people choose their representatives like MLAs, MPs through an election who in turn takes decisions or formulate laws as per larger public interest. So this one is participatory democracy and this one is representative democracy. So in general, all democracies are participatory. Without the participation of people, there cannot be democracy. But participation in decision making can be direct and indirect. So here, 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act changed representative democracy, that is indirect democracy, to participatory democracy, that is the direct one. Now, this act underscores the principle of subsidiarity. Now, what is principle of subsidiarity? It means that the functions of administration shall be carried at the smallest unit of governance possible and delegated upwards only when the local unit cannot perform the task. So, in other words, any activity which can be performed at the local level should be decentralized. So now let's see significance of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992. Now, first thing, this act added part 9 to the constitution, that is the Panchayats, and it contains article 243 to 243O. It also added 11 schedule which consists of 29 functional items of the Panchayats. The Amendment Act provides shape to the Article 40 to the Constitution, that is DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy, which directs the state to organize the village panchayat and provide them powers and authority so that they can function as self-government. Now, this act has two parts. First one is compulsory provisions. These must be added to state law, which includes the creation of the new Panchayati Raj systems, like organization of Gram Sabha, creation of three-tier Panchayat system, direct elections. Minimum age for contesting would be 21 years. Indirect election to the post of chairman, reservation of seats, reservation for the women, creation of state election committee, creation of state finance committee. Another part is voluntary provisions, and these include like voting rights to the MP and MLAs in these bodies, reservation for the backward classes, giving the PRI financial powers, and devolution of functions under 11th schedule. So this is the discretion of the state government. Let's understand in detail the important features of the 73rd Amendment Act. The first in this is that Act provides for the establishment of the three-tier system of Panchayati Raj in the states. That is village level, intermediate and district level. The base level is the Gram Panchayat. Gram Panchayat covers a village or group of villages. The next is intermediary level is the Mandal. The intermediary level body need not to be constituted in smaller states. And the apex is Jila Panchayat, covering the entire rural area of the district. Now, the next is that Gram Sabha is the primary body of the Panchayati Raj system. Basically, Gram Sabha is a village assembly made up of all the registered voters in the Panchayat's jurisdiction. It will exercise powers and perform such functions as determined by the state legislature. Now, the members to all the levels of Panchayat Raj are elected directly, and the chairpersons to the intermediate and district level are elected indirectly. That is, from the elected members. And at the village level, the chairperson is elected as determined by the state government. So this is all about election of members and chairperson. Now the next is reservation of seats for SCs, STs and women. Now here you should remember that reservation for backward classes comes under voluntary provisions. But here reservation of seats for SC, STs and women comes under compulsory provisions. So the seats are to be reserved for SCs and STs in proportion to their population at each level. Out of the reserved seats, 1/3 seats have to be reserved for the women of the SCs and STs. And out of the total number of seats to be filled by the direct elections, 1/3 have to be reserved for women. Let's understand this. Suppose this is a pool of seats for SCs and STs. So from this, 1/3 seats have to be reserved for the women of the SCs and STs. Now, this is the total number of seats, and in this, 1/3 have to be reserved for women. Next feature is that Act provides for a 5-year term of office to all levels of the Panchayat. However, Panchayat can be dissolved before the completion of its term. Next, State Election Commission. This commission is responsible for superintendence, direction and control of the preparation of electoral rolls and conducting elections for the Panchayat. You might know that it is different from Election Commission of India. This is under Article 243K and Election Commission of India is under Article 324. So try to remember these details because these details are important from prelims perspective also. Now let's see the major powers and functions. Now the Panchayat may be granted by the state legislature such authority and powers required for them to operate as institution of self-government. The first in this is preparation of plans for economic development and social justice. And this involved 29 matters listed in the 11th schedule. Now this comes under Article 243G. And the best way to understand this point is with the help of example. Recently, the development of the Orathurai village in Tamil Nadu's Coimbatore under the Panchayati Raj system is perhaps one of the best examples of how decentralized governance at the grassroots level can change lives. Here, under the leadership of its former Panchayat president, the modest village has become the first local body in India to have its own 350 megawatt windmill. And this Panchayat earns a revenue of rupees 19 lakh per year by selling surplus power generated by its windmill to the state electricity board. So with this you can make it that how proper decentralization can change the life at the grassroots level. Next is about the finances. The state legislature may authorize a panchayat to levy, collect inappropriate taxes, duties, tolls and fees assigned to a panchayat taxes, duties, fees levied and collected by the state government, provide grant and aid to the panchayat from the state's consolidated fund, provide for the establishment of funds to credit all the money of the panchayat. Next, State Finance Commission reviews the financial position of the panchayat and provides recommendation for the necessary steps to be taken to supplement resources to the panchayat. And this comes under Article 243I. Next, state legislature can make provisions regarding the maintenance and auditing of panchayat accounts. Also, this act does not apply to the states of Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and certain other areas like hill area of Manipur, for which a district council exists, Darjeeling district of West Bengal, for which Darjeeling Gorkha Hill Council exists. However, Parliament can extend this part to these areas subject to the exceptions and modifications it specifies. Also, Parliament enacted provisions of the Panchayat's Extension to Schedule Areas Act 1996. Next, Act prohibits court from interfering in Panchayat elections. It declares that the constitutionality of any law relating to the delimitation of constituencies or allocation of seats to such constituencies cannot be challenged in any court. So if any statement is there that delimitation of constituencies or the allocation of seats can be challenged in court, then that statement is incorrect. Now, having seen the main features of the Act and powers and function with respect to 73rd Constitutional Amendment, now let's understand the major issues associated with Panchayati Raj institutions. Here, the devolution of 3F, that is funds, functions and functionaries, are the major challenge. We'll start with the functions. Here, the overlapping of functions of panchayats and municipalities with state government with respect to implementing various development schemes. So here, only minor civic functions are exclusively assigned to the local government. Let's understand this with the help of example that the transfer of various governance functions like provisions of education, health, sanitation, water was not mandated. Instead, the amendment listed the functions that could be transferred and left it to the state legislature to actually devolve functions. So the most common example is terrible state water boards, performing tasks that should have been left to the elected representatives of local governments who best understand local water problems and can be disciplined through the democratic process. Now let's see the another issue with respect to funds. See, local government can either raise their own revenues through local taxes or receive intergovernmental transfers. So 73rd Amendment recognized both form of public finances, but it did not mandate either. So the power to tax even for the subject falling within the purview of PRIs has to be specifically authorized by state legislature. So 73rd Amendment Act let this be a choice open to state legislatures, a choice that most states have not exercised. Now, the second avenue of revenue generation is intergovernmental transfers, where state government devolve a certain percentage of their revenue to PRIs. So the constitutional amendment created provision for State Finance Commission to recommend the revenue share between state government and local governments. However, these are merely recommendations and state governments are not bound by them. So though finance commissions at each level have advocated for greater devolution of funds, there has been little action by the state to devolve funds. So these are the issues with respect to the funds. Now under various state Panchayat Raj Acts, the respective state government or their nominated state functionaries command considerable power with regard to review and revision of actions taken by PRI. So what does it mean? That people comes from state government exercise dominant power over PRIs, which effectively sabotages the efficiency of this PRIs. Now let's see how they control the functioning of local bodies. By suspending a resolution of the panchayat, by making inquiry into the affairs of the panchayat, removing elected panchayat representatives under certain specified conditions, etc. So by doing this, They sabotages the efficiency of these institutions. Next problem is lack of staff. In most states, panchayat do not have the power to recruit their staff and determine their salaries, allowances, and other conditions of service. So, due to lack of financial resources, the power to recruit staff, and even if such power exists, remains grossly underutilized or not utilized at all. Last but not the least, another problem is Sarpanch Pati. It means men relatives, mostly husbands of elected women, run office in place of them. Example of this, recently several male relatives of newly elected women representatives of Panchayat in Madhya Pradesh took oath on their behalf. So these are the important issues associated with PRIs. Now, having seen the main features of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, its significance, power and functions of PRIs, then we have seen issues associated with PRIs. Now, let's see second ARC recommendation to overcome such issues. So, the first recommendation of second ARC for rural governance is that Gram Panchayat should be of an appropriate size, and Panchayat should have power to recruit personnel and to regulate their service conditions. Another recommendation is that the provision in some state acts regarding approval of the budget of a panchayat by the higher tier or any other state authority should be abolished. Then state governments should not have the power to suspend or rescind any resolution passed by the PRIs or take action against the elected representatives. Then there should be a comprehensive activity mapping with regard to all the matters mentioned in the 11th schedule. And a comprehensive exercise needs to be taken up regarding broadening and deepening of the revenue base of local governments. So these are the important recommendations of second ARC for rural governance. So at last, the democratic decentralization has taken a deep root and looks very much irreversible. For instance, while Kerala has devolved all 29 functions to panchayats, Rajasthan took the inspiration from Kerala to devolve many key departments such as health, education, women and agriculture to PRIs. Similarly, Bihar came out with the idea of Panchayat Sarkar, and states such as Odisha have increased 50% seats for women. However, to make decentralization a reality, state government must transfer funds, functions and functionaries to local bodies and take real ownership of the process. Now, our next discussion is based on this article, which appeared on page number 8 in the Hindu newspaper. This news article is about the arrest of Amritpal Singh, a self-appointed campaigner for a separate nation for the Sikh. Now, news about his arrest was received by the public of Punjab with a sense of relief. He had been on the run for weeks and now faces charges under the National Security Act, NSA, as well as several first information reports. One of the very important facts that one should keep in mind is that he has turned out to be a cipher. Neither he nor his cause of Khalistan appears to have any significant support among Sikhs. Article also suggests some precautions and measures that should be kept in mind while dealing with such elements. Now, if you look into your GS paper 3 syllabus, under the majority theme of security, various challenges pertaining to internal security like extremism, cyber security, non-state actors, etc. has been clearly mentioned. Considering the evolving dynamics of internal security, one can say that any kind of threat to internal security is an interplay of various factors and often multiple threats coexist. As was in the case of Amritpal Singh's issue, where separatism was the center of concern, but several other challenges like role of external state like ISI, security concern in border states, etc. were the undercurrents. Now, if you look into previous year mains questions, every year UPSC has been asking questions based on different themes of internal security like money laundering, cross-border cyber attacks, left-wing extremism. So with this you can see how important this theme is. And now, if you want to cover each subheading in detail, you can refer to Raus IAS Mains Compass for IR and internal security. Now, as the history of Punjab, in 1980 suggests what started as demand of autonomy soon spiraled into a bloody decade of terrorism. So here in this discussion, we will be taking up issue of terrorism and various aspects related to it. So let's begin the discussion. So the first question is, what is definition of terrorism? And it is surprising that attempts to arrive at an internationally accepted definition of terrorism have proved futile. This ambivalence is primarily due to two reasons. The first is varying perception. This you can understand with the help of example that a terrorist in one country may be viewed as freedom fighter in another country. For example, groups designated as separatists and terrorists in India, especially in Jammu and Kashmir, are being hailed as freedom fighters in Pakistan. Next reason is geopolitical aims. Now, some states resort to encourage various kinds of criminal acts through their own agencies or hired agents to subvert or to otherwise destabilize another lawfully established government. The best example is Pakistan's backing to Khalistan movement. Another example is Chinese involvement in Northeast insurgencies. So here, these two states resort to encourage various kind of criminal acts through their own agencies or hired agents to destabilize another lawfully established government, that is India. However, in crude terms, one can say that terrorism is a systematic use of violence to create a general climate of fear in a population and thereby to bring about a particular political objective. Now, one more thing you should understand that challenges like terrorism neither grow overnight nor have a definite reason behind their existence. There are plethora of reasons which may contribute to the rise of terrorism. So let's see important causes of terrorism. The first in this is historical factors, and this include injustice of past and distortion of history at times. The best example is terrorism in J&K and Northeast. Terrorism in these two places is a result of historical factors. Why? Because Kashmir issue is a result of differing interpretation of instrument of accession by India, Pakistan and Kashmiri separatists. Another important cause is religion. There have been several terrorist incidents which were motivated by religious fundamentalism. Now, what is religious fundamentalism? It is the movement based on belief of a community or individuals in absolute authority of the sacred text of its own religion or faith. They believe that their own religion is beyond any fault and thus should be forced on others. So that is why you can see that certain agencies exploit religion to promote terrorism. Best example is ISI launched an initiative in 1991 to forge an alliance between Khalistan terrorism that prevailed in Punjab and terrorist group in J&K. Another cause is ethnicity. Now, what is ethnic group? It refers to a social group that shares a common and distinctive culture, religion, language. Now, Northeast region has a long history of conflict and violence among tribal groups. Why? Because here ethno-nationalism is often expressed through violence. An example of ethnicity-based terrorism include Naga insurgency, Mizo insurgency, etc. Now, next is political apathy in effective redressal of grievances and lack of political representation often become breeding ground for terrorist activities. For example, most of Northeast was under Assam. However, political aspirations of different ethnic group could not be satisfied. And what happened? This led to insurgencies like Mizo insurgency. However, when this issue addressed politically, then Mizo insurgency was effectively controlled after Mizo Accord. Now, next cause is human right violation by majority or security forces have added fuel to the fire. This has been the case in almost all insurgency affected areas. For example, abuse of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, that is ASPA, in J&K and Northeast. Another factor is economic, where unequal distribution of resources lack of development, poor socio-economic conditions provides a fertile ground for extremist ideologies to flourish. This you can understand with the help of example that large proportion of recruits to extremist groups come from deprived, marginalized backgrounds or from regions which somehow seem disaffected by vibrant growth in many other parts of the country, like rise of Maoism in central India tribal areas which have generally lagged in terms of development. So now, when these causes or shortcomings get exploited by the state and non-state actors, suddenly what is being conceived as local and isolated issue soon becomes a threat to national security, as was the case in Punjab of 1980s, in which fundamentalism transformed into terrorism when it received backing in terms of arms and money arranged by ISI of Pakistan. Now, similar to the case of causes, manifestation of terrorism also takes various forms. So now let's see kinds of terrorism. Now, the first in this is state-sponsored terrorism. Now, state-sponsored terrorism is a terrorist violence carried out by active support of national governments provided to violent non-state actors. Now, state can sponsor terrorist groups in several ways, including but not limited to funding terrorist organizations, providing training, supplying weapons, providing other logistical and intelligence assistance, and hosting groups within their borders. For example, Pak sponsored terrorism, that is proxy war by deep state in India, especially in Jammu Kashmir, like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. Another example is that US supported Mujahideen during Russian invasion of Afghanistan in 1980s, which eventually led to the rise of Taliban. So here, state is sponsoring terrorist activities. Another type of terrorism is non-state actors-based terrorism. Here, individuals or organizations are involved in terrorist activities to influence politics at national level or international level, but do not belong to or ally themselves to any country or state, like Naxalites. However, these non-state actors operate hand in hand with enemy countries. Third category is ideology-oriented terrorism. First in this is left-wing terrorism. Now, ideological basis for left and subsequent violent movements was provided by writings of Marx, Lenin, etc. So, left ideologies believe that all existing social relations and state structures in capitalist society are exploitative in character and a revolutionary change through violent means is essential. So they are supporting violence to bring out the positive change. Example of this is Maoists in India and Nepal. They support violence to bring out the revolutionary change in the society. Another prevalent ideology is right-wing terrorism. This group seeks to maintain status quo or return to some past situation that they feel should have been conserved. So they may force government to acquire a territory or to intervene to protect rights of an oppressed minority in a neighboring country. For example, Nazi Party in Germany. Third famous ideology-oriented terrorism is religious terrorism. Practitioners of terrorism motivated by religious imperative consider violence as a divine duty or sacramental act. For example, Taliban and ISIS. Then ethno-nationalist terrorism. This can be defined as a deliberate violence by a sub-national ethnic group to advance its causes. Such violence usually focus either on creation of separate state or elevation of status of one ethnic group over others. For example, Tamilian nationalist groups in Sri Lanka and insurgents group in northeast India. So these are different kinds of terrorism. So now having seen the causes of terrorism and kinds of terrorism, now let's see effects of terrorism, impact of terrorism on different pillars of society. Now, the first and foremost impact of terrorism gets manifested in the economic arena of any country. Terrorist activities impact the economy in following manner. First, dislocation of economic activities. Why? Because instability in terror-affected area have never been a preferred destination for industries and economic activities. For example, Jammu and Kashmir industrial sector is way behind as compared to other states. Then another impact is damages to property. 9/11 attacks are example of loss of lives and property due to terrorism. The Twin Towers were reduced to rubble. Then diversion of funds to non-developmental activities. This you can understand with the help of example that higher expenditure on defense and police leads to diversion of funds which can be utilized for developmental activities, social welfare. For example, India's defense budget is 7th largest in the world and India is the second largest arms importer. Now next we'll see political effects. First in this is non-engagement of youth in politics. Now this is one of the impacts where terrorist activities have become a routine affair. For example, youth in Kashmir are misled by propaganda from terror organizations like LET, etc. Like the killing of young Burhan Wani is a testimony to this fact. Then trust in democratic process gets eroded. It's better to understand this aspect with the help of example that Srinagar Lok Sabha by polls of 2017 witnessed lowest ever turnout of 7.14%. And in such a scenario, winner cannot claim to be true representative of population of its constituency. So here you can see how trust in democratic process gets eroded. Now let's see effects on governance. There is erosion of faith in government. In Kashmir, the belief of people in the government has decreased considerably, and this is testified by the incidents of stone pelting across the valley. Deterioration of law and order. The law and order situation also deteriorates as a result of terrorism and related activities. Example of this is attacks on police and security forces in Kashmir Valley, Northeast India and Naxal affected area. Then next, social effects. Disintegration and disturbance of age-old social structure. For example, tribal way of life is deeply disturbed because of left-wing extremism. Tribals are often harassed by Maoists and at times by police. The exodus of Kashmiri Pandits due to insurgency in 1990s is another example. So these are the important effects of terrorism. Now having seen the effects of terrorism, let's see few important steps to counter terrorism. So the first step to counter terrorism is intelligence gathering, because the foremost step is terror preparedness, and that includes gathering crucial information from ground level and collating that search that is easily accessible to the agencies involved. And thus, NetGrid established post 2611 is key for analysis of intelligence inputs. Next suggestion is training of security forces involved in counter-terrorism. Thus, counter-insurgency and anti-terrorist schools, that is CIATS, have been established to achieve this goal. Next, to secure key installations like army bases, buildings of national importance, police stations, because recently terrorists have been targeting army bases like Pathankot, Uri, etc. Next suggestion is to strengthen investigation, and for this, NIA, which is a key organization for investigation of all such cases, need to be strengthened to improve prosecution and conviction. The next suggestion is that prosecution should be speedy and accurate so that a correct precedence can be set up so as to discourage others from taking up such activities. Then to have good governance and socio-economic development. This would necessitate high priority being given to development work and its implementation on ground, for which a clean, corruption-free and accountable administration at all levels is an imperative necessity. The next suggestion is respect for rule of law. Governmental agencies must not be allowed to transgress law, even in dealing with critical situations caused by insurgency or terrorism. And for this, police and governmental forces must adhere to some basic codes of conduct, because this will help in checking alienation of people. Then countering subversive activities of terrorists. Government must give priority to defeating political subversions or propaganda. For example, terrorists and Maoists. Psychological warfare or management of information services and the media in conjunction with intelligence wing of the police can play an important role in achieving this objective. The next suggestion is to provide appropriate legal framework because ordinary laws may not be adequate to book a terrorist. So it requires special laws and effective enforcement mechanism but with sufficient safeguards to prevent its misuse. Now, last but not the least, a multi-dimensional response to combat terrorism would require well-coordinated action on all fronts and agencies, with civil society, media, and political parties has an important role to play. Now, first key pointer is based on this news article, and context of this article is that centers ambitious, vibrant villages program which aims to develop infrastructure and open up villages along with China border to tourists will be integrated with Prime Minister Gati Shakti mega project. Now let's see more facts related to this in the form of true and false. The first statement is Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, Dehradun has been roped in to provide satellite images and GIS mapping of the projects that will be taken up under the scheme. Now this statement is false because Bhaskaracharya National Institute for Space Applications and Geoinformatics in Gujarat has been roped in to provide satellite images and GIS mapping of the project that will be taken up under the scheme. This institute will be tracking the infrastructure and other land use changes in the border villages for real-time monitoring. Now let's come to the second statement. Main aim of PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan is to upgrade all the state highways into 4-lane highways of international standard. Again, this statement is false because PM Gati Shakti envisages the creation of system for interconnected and multimodal transportation networks like national highways, railways, waterways, telecoms, leading to integrated economic and infrastructure development, improved trade competitiveness, promotion of exports and employment generation. Now our next pre-pointer is based on this news article which appeared on page 11, and the first statement is relative humidity is the ratio of the mass of water vapor actually in the air to a unit mass of air. Now this statement is false because this statement is best defines the absolute humidity. However, relative humidity is the most important and reliable measure of atmospheric moisture. It is the ratio of the amount of water vapor actually in a volume occupied by air to the amount the space could contain at saturation. Now let's come to the second statement. If a relative humidity is low, one will sweat more even when sitting still on a hot day. Now again this statement is false because higher the relative humidity of air, the more it is filled with moisture. So when air already contains a lot of moisture, it won't easily accept more. This means that the sweat on your skin can't evaporate. At the same time, the body keeps sweating as it is still expecting to cool itself. As a result, if the relative humidity is high, you can sweat on a hot day even when you are sitting still while your body keeps accumulating heat. This can quickly become dangerous. So that's all for today. Stay tuned for more such updates.